We'll just give it a few seconds to see who else can jump on the call and then we'll get going. But thank you very much. Hopefully, the chat is enabled. So if anyone's there and wants to say say hi and let us know where you're from, that would be great. There will be an opportunity for questions later on, but feel free to pop anything in the chat as we go along. So if somebody would please just introduce themselves in the chat, that'd be fab. Just so that we know it's working. But thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. We know how busy you all are, whether you're watching us now live or whether you're coming at it later as a recording. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and listen to us and hear what Katie's got to say. Just going to give it a few more seconds for a few more people to join and then we'll get started. Okay, well, I think we're going to get started now. Thank you all so much for joining us. As I said, we really appreciate you taking the time. And today we're going to be hearing from Katie. We'll do some more introductions in a minute, talking about how she's approached bringing her telephone appeal in-house. Many of you will already be working with us or be familiar with us, but just a little bit about Hubbub in case you're not. So at Hubbub, basically what we do is we bring the expertise within our team together with our platforms and technology and software. And then we work with you to create holistic regular giving programs. So we're really well known for our giving days, but we also work with customers on challenge weeks and all year round online giving, telephone appeals, very flexibly, which Katie will talk about today. We've got donor engagement and stewardship platform, and also we very much look at supporting our customers with wraparound consultancy, ensuring that you have all the support and advice you need to go on and deliver those programs to ensure great impact within your communities. So that's a little bit about Hubbub. Sorry. And very briefly about me before I hand over to Katie. I'm a consultant here at Hubbub. I have been on the team for a year and it genuinely has been the best year of my career. I've worked in fundraising for 20 years and I've been really fortunate to work in both the UK and the US and had the opportunity to work with a whole variety of organisations, including education, but also non-profits across all areas of fundraising. And I just really enjoy getting into the community now and meeting so many of you and hearing about all the wonderful different things that you're doing. So I genuinely love my job. And I had the absolute pleasure this year to get to know Katie and to work with her. And I'm going to hand over to you now, Katie, if you'd like to introduce yourself. And then we're all looking forward to hearing your story. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Heather. So I'm Katie. My role is Philanthropy Officer at Benenden School, which is an independent girls' boarding school in the kind of heart of Kent. We educate girls from year 7 to year 13. So I've been at Benenden just over 2.5 years now in my role, which is really focused on building the regular giving program at Benenden, introducing giving days and telethons, and yeah, building the regular giving program that way. I also do a bit of work with managing portfolios of donors and major gifts. So I've kind of been focusing on that during my time at Benenden. And previous to that, I worked at a similar school, Wickham Abbey, in High Wycombe as their alumni relations officer. So had the pleasure of working through COVID in that role and pivoting all of the events and communications digitally and virtually, which was a really rewarding challenge. Really enjoyed that. So yeah, very lucky now to be able to kind of take both perspectives from alumni relations and development into this role at Benenden. So I do that, and then I'll also talk a little bit in my presentation later about alongside my development role, I'm also a deputy house mistress in one of our 6 boarding houses at Benenden. So that's kind of really helped me during the process to transition our calling campaign in house as well. So kind of have 2 hats on in that sense, which I'll talk a little bit about later. So yes, what I'm going to be talking about today is dialing it in, how to call the shots on your in-house telephone appeal. And Heather and I had a lot of fun coming up with the title for that and thinking of a couple of puns. So hopefully you all enjoy that. But yeah, Benenden has had a kind of cycle for 4 years now of running calling campaigns in-house. So if you go on to the next slide, please, Heather. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about during this webinar are the pros and cons of running your campaign in-house, some of the obstacles, how to overcome them, the challenges we faced. There was a few, few of them, some quick tips, really easy wins for an in-house campaign, the things we worked really well for us, and of course, the feedback, some of the challenges we had there as well. And then I'm going to kind of story tell a little bit about how we got to the point where we ran an in-house campaign this summer just gone, and the journey that we took to get there. Obviously, it wasn't year 1 of running them completely in-house, so I'll talk a little bit about that. So just for clarity, the first year that we ran a calling campaign at Benenden, it was on site. Students worked in our sort of language lab library to make calls in person. And then after that, they've been completely remote, so all online. So I'll make it clear when I talk about when we did an in-person campaign versus remote, but just to kind of make clear that most of any of our fundraising calling campaigns have all been virtual off-site campaigns. Brilliant. So I'm going to start with an analogy which my boss, Kyle Johnson, who's the Director of Development at Benenden, described to me when kind of talking about the justification of setting me the challenge of transitioning our calling campaigns in-house at Benenden. So he said, Katie, using our fully managed consultant for the past 2 years has been the kind of chauffeur-driven Rolls-Royce experience of telephone campaigns. And in reality, we really need to be driving a Ford Fiesta ourselves instead. So, of course, what he meant by this was that the campaign in its first year, when we had a fully managed campaign with a consultant, came with all the bells and whistles. And yes, it had a really good amount of income, around £80,000 over a 5-year giving cycle for us. So that was our first year of fundraise results, which we were very pleased with. However, each year of the 4 years that we've been running campaigns, I was learning more about the processes needed, upskilling myself with knowledge of the requirements and softwares needed, and all the documents with adaptations had been created from year 1, which we could adapt for future campaigns. So we no longer needed a fully managed campaign with every single module, having now gone through the experience and come out the other side. So kind of going back to the analogy, I've now passed the test and received my driver's license to begin driving on my own, but not in the Rolls Royce. And it was true. After successfully running our campaign fully managed in year 1 and year 2, we no longer needed every single module. And it was during the procurement process during year 3 that we began looking at different options to begin the journey to transition from fully managed to in-house, sort of looking for flexible options, which would allow us to choose only the modules that we really needed. And of course, saving costs where we had the skills in our own team to make certain tasks happen. So we started with the Rolls Royce and ended up with Ford Fiesta on our telethon journey, which seems in a traditional sense a downgrade, I understand. However, in this sense, ending up in the driver's seat of the Ford Fiesta enabled us to have sort of an improved return on investment, making the fundraised income for our bursary scheme. So that's what all of our telephone campaigns have fundraised for, our Be the Change bursary campaign. It made that income go further with a higher percentage of that those funds going directly towards recipients rather than focusing on consultancy costs when we didn't need them to be directed there anymore. It especially gave me the confidence and skills to end up managing a team of 12 callers and running a successful campaign. But it is very important to note that we would not have been able to get to the stage this summer of running our calling campaign in-house without the support of consultants along the way and all those softwares and support. But most importantly, one of the things that was a huge perk being able to run the calling campaign in-house was the flexibility to suit our school diary, our callers' schedules, and the needs and requirements of Benenden to make the process sustainable and have longevity. This is where Hubbub come in, and I'll circle back to that a little bit later. But starting with the Rolls-Royce decision to launch telephone campaigns at Benenden in year one. Next slide, please, Heather. So it was in 2021 that Benenden had year one of our calling campaign, the kind of launch of telethons at Benenden. And the idea arose during the fallout of COVID, the COVID pandemic. So the school, this was before I joined the role, but the school realised the need to reach out to our alumni community who were likely facing a period of isolation after the pandemic. We wanted to check in on their well-being and offer some human connection from a friendly, familiar face at Benenden. These weren't fundraising calls, but affinity calls designed to provide an emotional touch point. So rekindling fond memories of our alumni's time at Benenden and offering a positive experience following what was quite a difficult period. So all of our events and communications gone online for alumni, so they'd been really lacking that personal connection to the school over the last couple of years. So it was decided this particular campaign would be an on-site one, our first and only on-site campaign. But to run this, we had a group of sixth form students who volunteered to make these calls. So again, this is a unique element of our first year was exclusively sixth formers performing the calls and volunteering, so not getting paid for the role. So it took place over 2 weeks, and the students were stationed. You can see from the photos, they were stationed in our school library, logging into the computers there and making the calls to reach out to alumni then. So the key here for our first year was that there were no financial asks made during these calls. It was really purely about re-engaging with our community. But the great thing was our students benefited immensely from this process, despite no fundraising. Learned excellent telephone etiquette and manner from the training. They gained knowledge about the school's history from alumni and those unique perspectives. Lots of fun traditions and memories that were mentioned, and even created network opportunities for themselves. Received university advice, career advice from very well established alumni that they were calling. So this campaign really was focusing solely also on just calling alumni. There were no other segments of members of our community like parents or former staff that we were calling, just alumni. So year one, the campaign was fully managed by our consultants who took care of the logistics. So they were on site, stayed at a hotel nearby, to oversee the campaign. And following this, the feedback was amazing, really positive. Our alumni expressed gratitude for the calls, especially during that difficult time. Many shared really lovely, heartwarming stories, which then we were able to use as case studies to kind of justify continuing the campaign the following year for year two. But in essence, this initial campaign, year one, really laid the foundation for future telethons at Benenden. And it wasn't about asking for money. It was really about strengthening our bond with our alumni community. And when the time came to make a financial ask in year two, we already had a strong rapport and a positive precedent from year one to build upon. And this was really the first step and really vital in kind of also gaining organisational buy-in. The senior leadership team and wider kind of school community, maybe seniors board, had previously expressed some resistance to having a fundraising telephone campaign, which I think many schools experience. It can be quite a challenge to kind of get it through and signed off. But after this affinity campaign, they really quickly saw the value of the efforts and followed the positive feedback and saw the case studies received during the campaign, alongside obviously the really visible benefits to our own students from this experience as well. So year two, asking for money. We transitioned from purely affinity-based calls to launching our first fundraising telethon. So we built on the success of year one, got that organizational buy-in, sign off to be able to push through the fundraising element of this now. We also retain the same consultancy team to manage the logistics of this fully off-site remote campaign. Obviously, we were introducing this big new element, processing donations over the phone, asking money for over the phone. This was brand new for the school at this point, so we wanted that consistency. We wanted that kind of strategy and support, and it was really invaluable working alongside consultants in helping us navigate the complexities of this new phase. And then it really allowed us to focus on refining other elements like strategy, the recruitment and caller training, really getting the best caller team and making connections with our students. So the results of this campaign spoke for themselves. We contacted 462 seniors or had conversations with 462 seniors, resulting in 108 gifts, which was about a 23.3 conversion rate from those spoken to that ended up donating. In total, we generated an immediate pledge total of £39,248, with long-term pledges over a 5-year giving cycle about 72,000 just over. So that this campaign, we had particularly high contribution from new donors, so really great tool for us for donor acquisition. And our largest gift was from a previous non-donor UK alumni who donated in total over £21,000. So again, really great for identifying donors and potentially major donors who we didn't have research or knowledge of before, really. The key learning curve for us here was the recruitment of the callers. And we found success through personal engagement during professional skills program sessions, which were kind of like sixth form based lessons, particular lessons run for sixth formers outside of the normal curriculum, focusing on where people could come and speak, provide opportunities. But I came and spoke to the year 12s and 13s to offer this opportunity and sat with a panel of previous callers from the volunteering year, and we did a Q&A to really bring alive the experience and communicate the benefits to callers. And we also focused on kind of having targeted communications to those sixth formers. So as part of the calling campaign for this year, we decided we wanted year 12s and year 13s, current pupils, to have the opportunity to make the calls alongside recent leavers, so young alumni. But for our current students, we're really focused on how do we best get through to them. An email from the development office isn't going to quite get the response that we would like it to. So we used the tutoring system. Each student had an individual staff tutor. So we went through them and asked them in their weekly tutor meetings to speak to the students about this opportunity and, really speak about the benefits and how they could give back, alongside also reaching out to the house mistress and master team to go through the boarding house route. So during weekly house orders and meetings, the sixth form house staff in particular could keep reminding the students how great of an opportunity it would be to sign up to. The response from recent seniors was lower than anticipated this year. So we kind of looked at that and plan to introduce more incentives to the recruitment process, such as vouchers and bonuses and refer a friend schemes, really advertising and focusing on the benefits for the callers as well as what they'd be doing for us. So from a planning perspective, we really learnt the importance of preemptively organising timelines, materials and team responsibilities. So for example, this particular year, we ensured pre-call letters were sent well in advance, so about a month, alongside providing alumni an opportunity to opt out. Which we didn't really previously need to do because it wasn't a fundraising exercise, but this year it was really important, which obviously doing so led to a more receptive calling pool. The year after, we kind of planned to handle pre-calling mailing in-house to maintain kind of better control over the quality, timing, and reduce further cost. When it came to the actual phone calls, we really refined our strategy based on feedback from both the callers and community the previous affinity year. And we recognised a big change was allowing the callers to build confidence before approaching our high-level prospects, making sure they really felt comfortable with the ask process before we gave them our kind of bigger, not necessarily major donors, but people with a higher capacity that we included within the pool. We also introduced more structured post-shift debriefs to discuss successes and challenges of the callers, really providing our team with a clear path for continuous improvement as we progressed along the weeks of calling. But overall, transitioning to a fundraising telethon required a lot of detailed planning and real-time adjustment. But it was really thanks to our consultants' guidance and the insight gained from year one, we successfully launched a very effective campaign with strong results, which really set a solid foundation for calling campaigns at Benenden for future years. A really key point and a learning for me was really the importance of looking after your callers, really ensuring they were having a positive experience and actually surveying them after the end of the campaign as well. That's something our consultants did. They were the ones employing the callers. The school was kind of slightly removed from that element, but they put out a survey to them after, offering maybe other opportunities as they went on to university to be involved in calling campaigns again, but saying, would you take part in this again? What's your feedback? What's your kind of feeling about it? So we found this first pool of callers would end up being a real catalyst for success in future years for us, building on experience in future campaigns and being able to offer insights, experience to our new callers when they took part as more experienced callers. So the retention of this year of callers was really, really key to us. So in summary, if I could go on to the next slide, please, Heather. Thank you. In summary, year two included a fully managed campaign. We reflected on a lot of our learnings. And then when planning in year three, we took time to complete a cost benefit analysis and concluded the monthly direct debits were taking over 2 years of, monthly payments to offset our consultancy costs. And this provided us with the information that we needed to ensure the longevity of our campaign, but also put forward the journey to use year three to transition to a fully managed in-house campaign. After this cost benefit analysis, we really found it wasn't a sustainable model for us with the amount of income we were gaining from these kind of donations at this kind of smaller and mid-level range versus the costs. Our idea was to heavily reduce the modules we sought consultancy support with, kind of identifying areas we could take in-house and focus on upskilling in the areas we currently relied on external help for. So year three, we took a really pivotal step in transitioning the campaign to an in-house model. So after the cost benefit analysis, we found managing the campaign internally would not only save costs and improve return on investment, obviously, but would also actually present a really valuable opportunity to upskill our own in-house development team. It would allow us to gain direct experience in overseeing all the campaign logistics, but also have the opportunity to really deepen our engagement with the students recruited as callers. I don't know if others find, but within the development office, depending where you're placed in the school, you can become and feel quite isolated from the school community, and having that insight of what is going on day to day with the girls and to be able to feed back to parents when you're having those donor conversations is really important. So one of the primary benefits of going in-house was the improvement in the rapport, to be honest, between the development team and the student callers. With us managing recruitment and the day-to-day interactions, we could really establish a more personal connection with the students, which led to higher caller morale and engagement levels. So I found that particularly important because the success of the campaign heavily relies on the callers feeling supported and well prepared for the conversations that they would be having. So the year previous to this particular campaign is when I became a deputy house mistress, as I mentioned earlier, which was quite a visible role in the school. We have 6 boarding houses. I'm deputy house mistress in one of the kind of middle school houses, so a house that has students from year 8 to 11. So not necessarily even a sixth form house to be able to directly kind of target those sixth formers for those opportunities. But now I've been in that role a couple of years. Some of the year 11s that I've been deputy house mistress of are obviously entering sixth form. They know me a lot better, I know them, so reaching out to them, especially in the interview process, was really helpful, and I could kind of it was not that the process was awkward before, but they really, they felt a lot more comfortable and knew who we were, which also really raised the profile of the development office and helped the students understand what we did and what our function was. However, we really recognised that we still lacked certain expertise and resources, particularly around training and call supervision. Therefore, we chose to retain consultancy support for year three in these areas. Some of the areas in year three that we sought consultancy support with was training our student callers to ensure they were confident and equipped with the right skills. Supervising calls using traditional telephone software, which would provide real-time feedback and call monitoring, campaign management, data management, and setting ask amounts, which required a more sophisticated approach than we could handle at that time internally. And the recruitment of callers, our HR team was stretched and didn't have the bandwidth capacity to manage this element. So the years previously, our consultant had always employed our callers, and the benefit of that is that you're as a school, you have a step back in case anything goes wrong. If you have to have, awkward conversations, if a caller isn't performing, and decide that it's not worth having them sort of remain for the rest of the campaign. So that was a pro. And at this stage, we needed to kind of pay the premium, to be honest, to go ahead and make the campaign possible by having our callers recruited by the consultant. But by retaining all of those consultancy services just mentioned, it allowed the Benenden team to really focus on managing the core aspects of the campaign. So transitioning certain elements in-house already this year, while also benefiting from the professional support in specialist areas. So this kind of hybrid approach, as it were, was really key in our successful transition, and prepared us for fully managing the campaign in the future years. So this year, I really had it in my mind that the challenge was to take it in-house next year. So I was also kind of picking up on things and making notes and making sure I had the knowledge and was making note of it for next year. Next slide, please. So year four, taking it in-house. The challenge was set. I'd picked up the keys to my Ford Fiesta. Sadly, I was missing some of the key functions, such as a driving wheel, a gear stick, mirrors, or in telethon talk, the things I now didn't have and had to contend with were no software, recruitment, now doing that in-house, the script format, how are we going to make an alternative solution to that, call monitoring, gift processing over the phone, caller training. These were just a few of the things running around my head in how the world we were going to take this on, or how I was going to take this on, from our consultant. So our kind of consultant Rolls-Royce level software had dealt with all these things previously, and now we didn't have their software. So all of the aforementioned also disappeared, and I was tasked with finding solutions. So this is a little sort of meme of how my reaction was, or pretty similar there. So yes. But, however, all things considered, next slide, please. We did it. We managed it. We did it somehow. So, and just to reassure you, it can be done, and with also just a team of one or two members. So if you are from a small development team, it is doable. We did it. We're proof. So I just thought it would be nice on this slide to kind of include a photograph of our end result, our 2024 calling team. So of particular interest to me, 4 of these callers were alumni. Actually, also 4 of them were bursary students, which, oh my goodness, was just brilliant. I think 4 of them as well were former callers. So that was great. And actually, 5 of them, we had a team of 12. Obviously, there's slightly less in this photo. But one of our callers who is not in this picture was also a former caller. But I think that actually just goes to show what a benefit it was of running it in-house, because that caller's absence actually shows how flexible that this campaign was able to be, because 100% of our callers did not need to attend 100% of the shifts, which we really found quite challenging with a sort of more fixed package with consultancy before, trying obviously to make sure that the hours the callers are working, they're working right, and you're getting return on investment there. They're making donations back for the amount of time that they're calling. But we had some really experienced former callers that we'd used the past couple of years, and we wanted to include them, and we could. The particular caller that doesn't feature in this photo had annual leave or was on holiday the whole of the first week, so didn't come to that, did attend the training. That was really important. I think that's probably a non-negotiable. But yeah, she joined for the second week and she was brilliant. She got in more donations and we ended up paying her salary for, so obviously great there. But a real also value added is that our 4 or 5 former callers were able, especially during the training, to share their previous experiences of calling. And I think Heather and I found that really helpful, as obviously, especially this is a new challenge for us taking it in-house. The caller training was a new process for me. So having those former callers kind of hype up, give examples, give, reassuring advice, especially during the kind of role play process, was absolutely invaluable. So that is something we were so pleased with, that we were able to achieve with our calling team this year. Yeah, next slide, please. So these are some of our kind of key stats from this year for the 2024 calling campaign. So it's important to note, obviously you'll notice that I mentioned that year 1 and 2 we made around £80,000 in pledges for a 5-year giving cycle. This year it's for about half of that, 41,000. But yeah, as I said, it's really important to note that we knew our 4th year of calling campaign, consultant or not, would generate lower income figures than the previous 2 years. It was really the natural flow of how our data was being worked. Many of the people that we called this year in 2024 had already had calls previously, the previous 2 years, and didn't pick up, so they were a naturally less engaged pool. However, clearly from these statistics, it was still worth working this data to receive the results appearing on screen. We also this year, which was a brand new thing for us, were able to include uplift asks for our first time. So asking those that had given from the previous, 2 years ago of the calling campaign, so they'd now been donating for a 2 or 3 year giving cycle, to ask them to give slightly more a month and uplift them. So this process really needed a very detailed amount of tailoring and training to the callers to ensure that the tone was right, because we wanted to make sure we were thanking them for their support and really communicating the impact of their gift and explaining if they had, if they had capacity to increase slightly and how much of a difference that would make, but not at all demeaning their current gift and giving the impression that it was no longer enough. We obviously did not want to risk, getting on anyone's bad side, spreading the wrong message and have them cancel a gift. So I chose to only put my most experienced and emotionally intelligent callers on that shift. I went for 2 former callers, and before we kind of introduced that segment of prospects to them, I had a one-to-one call with them to explain everything, made sure that they understood, went over each individual prospect's new ask amount and what they were currently paying, told them additional information like when they'd started donating, if they're given to any other causes. So that obviously was quite time consuming, but it's a risky ask, so we wanted to make sure we were doing that right. But I think it was about 60% of those that we asked for an uplift did give more. So that was really worth doing, and obviously re-engaging, and also kind of obviously it was an ask call but also a stewardship call at the same time. Next slide, please, Heather. So the real question is, taking it in-house, how? How did we do it? Which was certainly a question I asked myself at the beginning of this journey. But in summary, it required a lot of planning, collaboration, and resource management. And although our core telethon team only consisted of 1 to 2 people, we did identify areas where external support was still crucial, and strategically partnered with kind of key stakeholders, including Hubbub and that, to ensure our success. So in terms of a timeline, I began planning the 2024 calling campaign on the 20th of May, and the campaign ended fully on the 9th of August. So, with follow-up communication, so 3 months in total. So I made, a project Gantt chart listing out every single task from the pre-call to shortlisting applicants for recruitment to sending out Benenden brownies and sweetie packs to the callers on their first weekend shift. So every single thing was on there, and obviously we were able to plan who was taking on each task. We continued to collaborate with our HR department, particularly in recruiting the student callers. So this year, I made sure I'll go into a bit more detail in a couple of slides' time, but we worked with them to facilitate that we were able to recruit callers in-house to save that cost as well. So we also developed comprehensive scripts and conversation guides to ensure our callers were prepared for every type of conversation. Effective data management was critical, especially when you're working with so many segments of prospects. And our decision to retain call room software helped monitor call activity. That was a really important point for me. It was to be able to listen into the conversations and provide support live on the call. Motivation of our callers was really a significant focus for me this year, taking on the responsibility of line managing the team of 12 callers. So we introduced pep talk speakers. So kind of before every calling shift, we'd have 15 minutes where we all gathered on a team Zoom or a Zoom call, where I'd kind of go over the itinerary for that shift, what the focuses were, which kind of segments of prospects we were going to be speaking to, because we introduced, different segments throughout the campaign. So I introduced using kind of guest speakers during that slot to motivate the callers, because the kind of split when we had used consultants was that the callers were working with me, but they were also working with one or two other campaign managers. And the poor callers had 2 weeks of just me after Heather and I were done with the training. So it was important to me to mix that up. So they got a kind of some other perspectives there. And I didn't drive them crazy. Next slide, please. So our first step was really identifying who our core telethon team was and the distribution of workload, of course. So the development office at Benenden is a department of 6 people. However, again, to reassure those with small teams, I was able to project manage the campaign completely almost as a team of one, bringing in our development manager who focuses on operations and systems for specific database tasks, and creation of what we called our mega spreadsheet, which was our alternative we invented as an alternative solution to the traditional kind of telethon software to manage our data. And that was what the callers were accessing to know who they were calling and the information about them. So we did identify that we didn't have the internal expertise to provide the complete comprehensive caller training. So yeah, identified this was an area we needed external support with. This was a really crucial part of the campaign, as obviously well-trained callers were the key to success here. So this is where we retained consultancy following our giving day with Hubbub, and Heather in particular supported to conduct in-depth training sessions over a 2-day period, ensuring all of our callers were confident, had the right skills, and were well prepared for handling all of the different types of calls that they would be taking on. So this 2 days of specialized training included things like mock calls, strategies for handling objections, setting the right tone for asking for donations. So Heather and I think it's important to say, Heather and I worked very much in collaboration during the preparation for the 2 days of training, and the 2 days of presentation as well. So from Beneden's point, I handled all of the details relating to Benenden and the school. So the expectation of the callers, the safeguarding information they needed, particularly with the challenge of having current students and recent leavers working together. The campaign specific briefing, so making sure the girls had all the information they needed and knew what the Be the Change bursary campaign was. And Heather provided all of the kind of best practice strategy, how to make the successful calls, the layout with the kind of different elements of the calls, and all of the other kind of important information the callers needed to know about actually how to make money on a telephone, how to ask for money. but it was really tailored, and that was the wonderful thing with Hubbub was the challenge we found is, okay, we're going to bring it in house and we're going to invent kind of a new script or conversation guide, and we're going to invent our own software, but how do we tailor the training to that? So that was where I think the flexibility of Hubbub for us worked so perfectly. And we really needed kind of flexibility on both sides there. So that was great. Um, that whole process, to be honest, and working with Hubbub was incredibly helpful to me personally, in my own professional progression. And Heather's support very much gave me the confidence in presenting to the callers for the first time and building good reports with them. But led by the facts and data, which is, what we found we were lacking. I ended up managing the team of 12 callers alone for the remainder of the campaign and post training. So once Heather had kind of logged out after the training, I was on my own. So that gave me such confidence working with her up until the training and during the training. So that was great. But yeah, as I just kind of briefly mentioned, the flexibility our package with Hubbub provided was really integral to us being able to pull this off. And being able to select kind of just that single module of we've got everything else covered here, we think, but it's the training. So then being able to facilitate that and really tailor everything to our kind of invented solutions. We couldn't have done it without that. We also, one of the really critical things I'm so grateful we were able to do this year was we identified the need for a senior telephone campaign caller. So we, alongside our team of 11 sort of normal callers, we created a senior telephone campaign calling position, which we wanted to be a former caller who could take on some of the admin and call a motivation games like the bingo and all of the things that the girls get vouchers for throughout the 2 weeks that they get really excited about. And also helping to monitor during the calling shifts, because obviously we went from myself and the campaign manager, the external campaign manager, monitoring calls, and now it was a team of 12 that I had to monitor alone. So that, especially, the fresh shifts after the training, sorry, the need for monitoring was slightly greater as the callers were kind of getting more confident and figuring it out and navigating the script. So the senior telephone campaign caller helped with all of that. And we paid them a couple of extra pounds per hour, but we kind of created that position around someone in mind. So again, I'll kind of circle back to that. But our core team, it was decided our telethon team consisted of myself as campaign manager, Melanie as the data manager slash spreadsheet guru, Heather with the training strategy on the consultant side of things, and then Isla was our previous former head girl. Isla Forbes was our senior telephone campaign caller. So we kind of had 4 people involved in various ways there. So step 2 for us was considering recruitment and how we were going to build our team of callers, not only with obviously the advertising of the position, but logistically with employing them. So in previous years, kind of mentioned our consultancy had covered the employment of callers, but this year it was a new challenge that we had to face, especially as I mentioned around the employing current students, which, as they're still at the school in their year 12 and 13 year, just added another layer of complication, obviously around DBS and various other elements like that. So we considered our learnings from previous years. And from the get-go, I made sure I worked with the director of HR closely to establish a timeline to provide as much notice and make really clear the requirements we needed to see if it was possible. Everything that we needed in order to successfully employ and recruit our team of 12 recent leavers and students. So we also found that our callers, they wanted more flexibility than to need to attend 100% of the shifts. And for us, it kind of internally, it wasn't a massive problem, but it was a challenge with kind of sort of a little bit of lack of flexibility there. One of our main challenges was we have quite an international community of students, and if callers wanted to join and take part from anywhere outside kind of a UK time zone, it also proved tricky. A girl from Hong Kong wanted to take part, but obviously with the time zone, she was working into the middle of the night, gave it a go, and previously we just hadn't been able to make that work. So we wanted to be able to facilitate callers that were interested in taking part. So that was something that we were keen to make work. So we ended up with a couple of very experienced callers being able to attend 1 or 2 weeks of the whole 2 weeks of calling. And yeah, the process of bringing it in-house enabled us to facilitate their involvement in the campaign when we kind of would have been told no previously, despite obviously them not being able to attend all of the shifts. So, but yeah, our HR team were great. They provided critical support in managing all of the application process, conducting initial assessments, doing kind of legislation, all of the legal parts of the recruitment. And their partnership really allowed us in the development team to ensure that the right students were recruited, prepared, and available to participate in the campaign. So myself and our head of philanthropy in our team of 6, Hannah, we sat in the interviews and kind of shortlisted and employed from there. So that was great to kind of have 2 of you on the interview panel, obviously 2 opinions. But it was obviously important for me to be on there as I'd be working with the callers throughout the campaign as well. So they were introduced to me from the get-go. So in order to do this, I really needed to upskill myself during this process. So I had to take on safer recruitment training to even be able to sit in on the interview panel. I wrote job descriptions and contracts for the positions of telephone campaign callers, alongside submitting DBS checks and shortlisting and interviewing every single candidate. And also providing safeguarding briefings for each interviewee and making sure they understood what it meant to work in a school as well. So but that whole process really enabled me, especially, to have more control over the final calling team. It's all very well if someone can take on the whole of the recruitment for you, but if you're not the one sat in on the interviews, you don't know who you're employing until they start working. So we were able to build rapport with each caller from the beginning, and also kind of, build our visibility and appear as, key figureheads from the get-go of the campaign. So they all had job descriptions, they all had signed contracts, including safeguarding specifics, and then we submitted pay slips for hours worked for them all, and submitted those at the end of the calling campaign to our finance team. And that was all sort of signed off by myself. So our step 3 here was to ensure we had enough student and kind of recent leaver callers. We wanted, obviously, to get the very best candidates for the shortlist. So we implemented a variety of recruitment strategies. So I did the 6th form presentations. Again, that worked really well. Also used the kind of panel of callers to feedback on their previous experiences, which encouraged others to sign up. Word of mouth always works best with students. They also want to be working with their friends during the summer holidays, so that was good. Went through the tutor and boarding house staff route again to identify potential candidates. We put it in the parent newsletter bulletin, had someone's mum apply for them. So that was great. But we did all of that great stuff again, and it worked really well. But as you can see from some of these screenshots here, we created strong branding within our communications to students and recent leavers to establish strong brand recognition for the calling campaign. Now, we'd done a 4-year cycle. It was becoming a thing. People now knew what it was. So that also helped with recruitment. So also incentives, we did refer a friend. If you apply and then also encourage a friend to apply and they get appointed, you get £20 voucher. We also now had this kind of pool of former callers, so I reached out to every single one of them to see if they might want to take part again. So that kind of retention of callers created a foundation for all of our future campaigns now. So as I mentioned, we had 5 previous callers that took part this year. And especially for our first year running the campaign in-house, previous callers took that kind of leadership role when going into the role plays, when they're practicing in the training, offering insight from previous experience and giving their top tips. So that was brilliant. But it also showed our students were getting a good experience out of this initiative and were enjoying it so much they were coming back year on year to take part. So a couple of our callers took part in all 3 of the campaigns. So they were getting as much out of it, kind of professionally and personally rewarding as they were putting out by getting in the donations and connecting with our community. So one of the amazing things as well, which I personally found hugely rewarding was we were lucky to have a number of bursary recipients themselves come forward as callers and apply. So it was nothing was more valuable than a direct recipient of the award talking to alumni down the phone about how much of an impact a Benenden education and has had on their lives, and in their own words has been life-changing. And we thought, I mean, how can you say no to that? Turns out people did say no to that, but but spreading the message about bursaries in the campaign was also a key element, and it was a lot harder to say no. um Obviously, now we've kicked off the recruitment process, it was time to develop our new in-house version of the script. If you can go next slide, please, Heather. Amazing. So if you've run a telethon, you know all about the script, which is very much the bread and butter of traditional telethons. So we are very keen to replicate this for our in-house campaign. But recommendation from Hubbub advised this year that it should be much more of a conversation guide and not a script. And turns out they were right. We thought about it, and in previous years we had alumni say down the phone, you're just reading from a script, aren't you, to our callers, which, happened in the kind of first shift or so as they were getting used to it. But Hubbub were right, but we wanted to build on the idea of the script, but refer to it much more, as Heather described, as a conversation guide and a safety blanket, still following the same kind of key stages of a call of, introduction, conversation / sort of job career chat, project chat about our bursary campaign, the ask, and then kind of softly finishing the call. So yeah, Hubbub, Heather in particular, suggested using guide questions that could be used rather than providing exact wording, which we'd done previously, of exact things the girls had to hit. So this kind of conversation guide allowed the conversations to sound much more authentic, allowed callers to have a genuine interest as well, actually, which is what the alumni were saying, rather than worrying about which section of the script they were on, where to get to next, had they said the correct wording. And the user experience of the conversation was key. So the user experience of our callers. We were able to practice thoroughly with the conversation guide we'd created during the training for it to become familiar to them. And we were also able to now having control of it by having sort of our own product of this. We were able to action live feedback on how the callers were finding the script and making amends during the calls to enable wholly a lot more positive experience. So there were definitely some teething issues in kind of inventing this new script using a Microsoft form rather than this more traditional telethon software, which is integrated with obviously very useful things, but that was the Rolls-Royce experience, that not the Ford Fiesta experience. So yeah, there were teething issues, but the great thing was we could correct these as we went, and we had a live kind of feedback pool of the callers as we went. So it was very much a rabbit warrant on the backside of the form, enabling so many different options depending on who the students were calling. So this year, in the past couple of years, we'd called alumni, we'd called honorary seniors, which were our long-standing former staff members once they'd left the school. And then also former parents that had donated. And then also you're battling with donor, non-donor, UK-based, overseas. So we had sort of personalised text for each segment of prospect, which was absolutely no easy feat. So we managed to plug in answers from that Microsoft Forms that the girls were filling out for each prospect that they were speaking to, even to log if it was just a voicemail. So we knew how many times we were calling someone, and we had a hard kind of hard stop on calling them more than 3 times. So that was important as well. But that information then all we merged it into the software Excel spreadsheet we'd invented that was the kind of our version of the data. So that the callers could see who they'd been allocated to call, all of the data about them, and obviously their phone number and things like that. So kind of in summary, the script and having an effective one was essential, and we were able to prepare tailored conversation guides for each constituent category. The callers could practice these several times, get really comfortable with them. And we really tried in training, emphasize closing the ask in a way that felt natural and not pushy. Obviously, you can kind of ask a certain number of times, and then you have kind of things that you say afterwards as fallbacks. But we wanted to make sure that was a really authentic process and train the callers in recognizing that, when not to ask those, when not to be pushy. Whereas, the trade down can work very effectively. And we ended up getting gifts using the trade down, but it was definitely an important balance to strike. Yeah, so as I said, we ended up using Microsoft Forms as our kind of alternative for the traditional script. SurveyMonkey would have also worked well. We kind of used Microsoft Forms at Benenden for things. So that was a software we were more familiar with, and also allowed us to merge into our other documents. So that was what we used. In terms of the call room software, this was one of the trickier areas to find an alternative solution in basically setting up your own call room and having the technology to monitor the calls. So previously for us, this had been a phone app that integrated with proper software. This obviously having a call room was instrumental in monitoring and supervising calls in real time. It allowed us to track each caller's performance, know when they were on calls, know when they were not on calls, and listening to the calls to provide feedback, understand where the teething issues were, where they were having tricky conversations, and enable everything to run smoothly. It was difficult trying to find a solution to replace the phone app and the call monitoring. We ended up using Zoom. They have a VoIP software. It wasn't perfect for us. They have, challenges like they have a 3-month minimum license. We only needed it for 1 month. However, even getting a 3-month of the subscription was still cheaper than the phone app we'd used previously or quoted for if we were to use that externally this year. So, pros and cons there, but it allowed us to set up a call software room. It allowed me to listen into the calls. It allowed our senior telephone campaign caller to listen into the calls. And it allowed us to ring all of the girls to provide feedback and have kind of a whisper function as well, where if we needed to kind of butt in on the call and just have the Benenden caller hear what we were saying, that was possible as well. Yeah, so that was what we used for that, and that was a big cost saver for us. I mentioned having pep talk speakers in, which was great. You'll see, apologies for the screenshot of me in a cowboy hat on the bottom left corner. One of the kind of things we did to motivate callers was the pep talk speakers, but also some fun, silly games running through. So that was a screenshot of our final calling shift where we had a silly hat competition, and the callers expressed various levels of creativity to craft the best hat, so to make their hat. Most stayed on the entire 7 hours of calling, some didn't, but it was something that kind of gave a bit of fun to the callers, which is quite hard, obviously, when you're running it online remotely, is to have that engagement and fun and game and silliness. So that was great. But in terms of the pep talks, I managed to, again, a little bit about splitting up who the girls were hearing from, so it wasn't just me the whole 2 weeks. But we had a former bursary recipient, Elizabeth, who you can see on the right, who was also a previous caller in year 1 and year 2. She's currently studying medicine at King's College London. So she not only came on the first Saturday shift to talk about how the bursary had changed her life, so the girls could really understand the impact of what they were doing, but also some top tips and tricks about her experience being a caller. And then Leslie on the left was a former staff member who is a current donor, so she gives regularly, and she is also my mother, which made her slightly easier to book, but that's besides the point. She spoke about the impact of seeing a student through their 7 years at Benenden, which she'd had a lot of experience with, and that's directly seeing the impact of how a Benenden education can change lives, but also her motivations for giving monthly, why she's chosen to do that. So they were some really kind of inspiring stories from both sides, non-biased, of course, but really helped the girls kind of get more out of the campaign.
And thanks, Katie. I'm just conscious for those of you that just had the hour slot to join us that you might need to start leaving now. We won't be offended, but you will be able to view the whole recording of the webinar on the website, and we'll send it out later. And also feel free to contact us at Hubbub if you'd like to be connected with Katie. But for those of you that are able to stay with us, that would be great. And I'll let Katie kind of wrap up the last few bits of information.
Well, yeah, sorry. Amazing. So, step 7 was our caller motivation game. So I spoke a little bit about this, but it was really important for us for the callers to feel welcome, like they're part of a team, which again can be a bit more challenging when you're running an online campaign. So one of the things I did was send them hard copies of all of the documents that they would need, all of the briefings, a copy of the seniors magazine so they could refer to some of the articles and see what the alumni had been doing. Alongside for the first, and a handwritten note for me welcoming them to the team. And on the first weekend shift, I sent out a box of our infamous Benenden brownies, so to get them through the kind of longer 7-hour calling shifts. But we also played games which our senior calling officer took on, things like, bingo. So girls could win vouchers by getting bingo, and we spin negative experience into positive ones. So even if you got, 10 voicemails in a row, or you got hung up on twice and then one donation, you could hit and still kind of be in for a chance of winning. Because obviously it can be quite demotivating to sit and have 20 voicemails in a row, but we turned it into a positive. Next slide, please. Brill. So a little bit more on our role at our senior telephone campaign officer. We kind of created this role around a former head girl, Isla, who had taken part in the campaign a couple of years in a row. So she was really experienced, and we wanted her on board. And she did absolutely brilliantly. I could not have run it this year without her. She completely took on all of the areas I just didn't have time for, being a team of one running this. All of the games she monitored, which obviously meant we lost her expertise from calling hours while she was doing that, but she kind of pivoted to calling for the second week when we didn't need monitoring as much. She was extremely passionate about the bursaries as well, and obviously was a natural leader, having been head girl. So that cost us, a couple of pounds more an hour, but to be honest, the value added was like brilliant. Couldn't have done it, as I said, couldn't have done it without her. So I will 100% be contacting her again if we run the campaign in the same way to take part again. So yeah, in kind of summary, our alternative solutions were using the Zoom VoIP for calling and software. Microsoft Forms replaced our script. We used an Excel spreadsheet for our data, kind of with the restricted access, so the callers could have access to that. And then obviously when we wanted to focus on areas overseas, like Asia, we focused calling those areas at the weekend, and we were able to kind of allocate out all the prospects in advance using this Excel spreadsheet. Donation process was a huge challenge for us. We ended up being able to take direct debits over the phone because it included non-sensitive card details. However, single gifts were a challenge. I think if we had more time, we could have found a better solution for, but this year, within the time scale, we couldn't find a solution to take single gifts from overseas prospects because of the sensitive details. So we ended up receiving pledges from them over the phone, followed up with Hubbub's donor engagement platform. The callers recorded a video, and the donors could click a button in the video, which took them to the single donation form, and they filled it out that way. But that is an area we didn't have as best of a conversion rate as we'd hoped for. So the videos there really helped the people that did fulfill those gifts overseas. So that is certainly a challenge and an area we'll look to improve upon for future years. Cons, obviously, it did require significant time and effort to take it in-house. I speak about this having run, a cycle of 4 years of calling campaigns at Benenden. But to be honest, it did require a lot of time, but in the 4th year, it didn't actually require that much more time than we would have taken using a consultant, because we were kind of a little bit more established along with the process. We knew what was involved. So it kind of depends, I suppose, where you're at in your journey. We did lack specialist areas in some areas, caller allocation, ask amounts, data specifics, but that was going to be a compromise by not taking more modules on with a consultant this year. Initial setup costs can be higher. Overall, we saved around £12,000 in consultancy costs this year by taking the different elements in-house. So that was a win for us, but obviously then had struggles with Zoom and the VoIP there. So kind of wins and losses both there, but overall definitely gets us further along in our journey. And as I spoke about, donation processing was a big challenge. So you just need to figure out what you are already currently doing and what's compatible with kind of with the legislation of taking gifts over the phone. The pros, obviously, I've spoken a lot about the flexibility. That was incredible. So appreciated this year. It was great for us. Really helps visibility and rapport of the development office and the students. I was the main contact and I've had much more feedback, much more, oh, hello, Miss Tyler's in the corridor when the girls see me. So when we work on more development projects, I'm kind of can be the main contact to reach out to them now and get them involved in, filming a video if they were one of the bursary recipients and having them speak out a bit more. But obviously mainly cost saving and really improving our return on investment because our model we had was great, but it wouldn't be sustainable in the results that we needed for future years. So my quick tips kind of to finish off, quick tips for in-house campaigns were upskilling your team for better control, using alternative software solutions and bringing that in where you can, dialing it back, investing time where you can, invest time in recruitment and training, and setting realistic expectations based on data. We can't look kind of at our results in comparison to the last 2 years and see that as we've not done as well. It's our data, and we needed to set realistic expectations from that. So I think I can probably sort of skip over results and learnings, but obviously we finished with £41,000 pledged over 5 years. But yeah, to kind of in conclusion, it can be done. We did it. I didn't think it would be possible when I got set the challenge by Kyle. So I did surprise myself and him probably. But Hubbub added massive value for us this year. We really would have struggled, I think, to achieve the results that we did without them. So a huge thank you to Heather for kind of the training, but also all the support afterwards as well. She was emailing me every day saying, well, how many pledges now? Keeping track of all the donations. So that was great. And obviously the flexibility was needed there to facilitate this campaign. So that was brilliant. And then I'll just leave you on one of our caller testimonies, if they have any questions, if we've got time for questions.
Thank you so much, Katie. It's really great. I'm sure everybody on the call and everyone watching back afterwards will have got so much from everything you've shared there. So thank you so much. Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions. However, if we go here, Katie's kindly provided her contact details, and I know she's on LinkedIn and she'd love to contact you. Or you can reach her or myself through hello@hubbub.net if you would like to talk to us at all about what working with us on your telephone appeal might look like. Katie did talk there a lot about the flexibility that we're able to offer, and that's something we're really proud of doing, because we know that you're all coming from different size teams with different levels of experience and capacity and ability within your team. So we're here to kind of support and guide on one side of things to fully deliver, and anywhere in between. We are really flexible. Excuse me, I haven't even been talking and I'm losing my voice. So if you are looking at reinvigorating your telephone appeal or looking the ways in which you might transition more of the elements in-house, we would love a call. And yeah, flexible is how we do it, make it really relevant, looking at your audience and your donor and the journey, really efficient and data-led. So next webinar will be coming up. You'll get an invite out to that on the 21st of November, where we're going to be really focusing in on emails and social media. You can subscribe on our website. And then just a reminder, which hopefully you've got from this call as well, is that we're not just giving days. We love working with our customers across a whole range of products, and being able to support you to ensure that you really are delivering a holistic program. But thank you so much, Katie, for giving up all that time. I know it takes a long time to put a presentation like that together, so we really appreciate it. And thanks to everybody that's attended today or has watched this back. We look forward to talking to you and seeing you all soon. Thank you very much.